Hello, welcome back. GovDoc Breakdown, no opinions, just facts and summaries of government documents per usual. All right, May 27th, Supreme Court opinion on an order, Apache Stronghold v. the United States. All right, another dissenting opinion here due to a denial of certiorari or denying of hearing the case by the Supreme Court. But as per usual, first, the background of the case. This case centers around an area known as Oak Flat, a sacred site for the Western Apache used for religious ceremonies and cultural practices for centuries. Historically, the U.S. government has protected the site and been in control of the land, but now a mining company, whom the land was transferred to back in 2014, which is important, remember that, Resolution Copper, wants to mine for copper under Oak Flat, which would create a crater up to 1,000 feet deep and 2 miles wide, basically destroying the site. In response, a nonprofit Apache Stronghold sued under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, arguing that this would stop them from practicing their religion. And the Religious Freedom Restoration Act says the government cannot, quote, substantially burden a person's religious exercise unless it's the least restrictive way to serve a compelling government interest. The Ninth Circuit rejected the Apache Stronghold's challenge, saying that destroying Oak Flat was not a substantial burden on religion. However, the reasoning that they gave is a little odd to say the least. So, the Ninth Circuit actually did say that preventing worship at a sacred site is a substantial burden. But the court created a special exception when it comes to dispositions like selling or transferring of government property, and saying that it does not count as a substantial burden unless it forces people to reject their faith or discriminates them compared to other religions. And so here's where we get to that important historical context. In 2014, a last-minute provision called the Land Exchange Act was added to a defense spending bill, and it ordered Oak Flat land transferred from the U.S. government to the mining company in question. So the land was technically transferred to the mining company, fulfilling the court's exception order. So the Ninth Court is basically saying that since the mining plan doesn't force the Apache to stop believing or treat them worse than other religions, the court is saying that that is not a substantial burden because the land was transferred. This was appealed to the Supreme Court and certiorari was denied, causing the lower court's order to remain, clearing the way for the mining of the Oak Flat land. Justice Gorsuch came through with a dissent, stating that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act does not have any exception for land transfers, and in fact explicitly includes using land for religious ceremonies. Gorsuch also pointed out that the Ninth Circuit wrongly relied on an old case, Ling v. Northwest Indian Cemetery Protective Association in 1988, that allowed the government to build a road near a sacred site, but did not deal with completely destroying a site like in this case. So basically Gorsuch is saying that the precedent that they used was not a direct comparison to this case. I would also just like to say, wrap up this video by saying that this may have far-reaching consequences for other religious sites on federal land due to the fact that the Ninth Circuit covers most federal land and many tribes. So this precedent could be used to deny protections in the future. But a key thing here is that the Supreme Court did not decide this case. So the decision is only required to be binding precedent in the jurisdiction of the Ninth Circuit. It does not make all other federal courts bound to this decision. So basically you got the District Court, Circuit Court, Supreme Court. Supreme Court has jurisdiction over all the courts, but since only the Circuit Court made this decision, only the courts under its jurisdiction have to use this as binding precedent, not all the courts under the Supreme Court. All right, so Kaimo, keep your mind open, do your own research, form your own opinion. Bye-bye, baby.